the ooh, okay. Specifically about the work that you've done at Topia Arts Center. And then hopefully we want to see how we can further collaborate outside of the interview process.
Great.
So that being said, would you mind introducing yourself, who you are, and what it is that you do?
My name is Nana Simopoulous, and I'm a musician, composer, musical director, but also on the faculty of School of Visual Arts. And my partner and I founded Topia Art Center in 2004 with the intention of creating a thriving art center for the northern Berkshires, kind of to bridge the gap between Pittsfield and North Adams. There was a lot going on in Williamstown and North Adams and a lot going on in Pittsfield, but Adams seemed to be a good place in between that could help further evolve the economy, the creative economy. So we found Topia, well, we found the theater, and the theater was closed for about 40 years. The last movie that was shown in the theater was Old Yeller, and that was 1986. It closed its doors, and mainly because the single theater movie houses were being replaced by the multiplexes. And so around that time, all of the theaters across the country that were single screen started shutting down in favor of smaller multiplex movie theaters that could show a variety of films. And this experience of a 30-foot screen went away at that point. And in addition to being a movie house, the Adams Theater was also a vaudeville stage. And I met some of the people who were whose parents were vaudeville artists, and the vaudeville was basically one or two performers, and they didn't really need a large stage. They could do their performances on a shallow stage that was so wide that didn't take up a lot of space in the theater. That way, they could also go from town to town, and the movie houses also had the ability to either have a vaudeville act or show a movie. So that's kind of a little bit of a brief history of the Adams Theater. And before the Adams Theater was the Atlas Theater, and the Atlas Theater was actually an opera house, but it was made out of wood and it burned down. So in its place, they built, in 1938, I believe, they built out of brick and mortar the Adams Theater. So that spot has had housed a lot of creativity since the 1800s. And it really was the focal point. It used to be a real center for social life in the town. I mean, you would go downtown to the local ice cream parlor, and then you would go to the movies. And we actually did interview a couple of people. I don't know if you had the opportunity to see the Adams Theater Remembered, which is on YouTube. It's like a 10-minute documentary that some of the students from MCLA did. They interviewed me and a couple of other people from the organization, but they also interviewed some of the old people who remembered going to the theater as kids. So I would recommend taking a look at that.
Yeah, I actually love that you brought that up, just because we've actually had some opportunity to meet with townspeople who shared their experiences about like getting dressed up and going to the movie theaters on Fridays, and like their experience socializing with each other. They identified the bathroom as a very popular social spot where they would smoke and hang out, which was really insightful and interesting for us to hear. So you already talked about a like Adams serving as a link between Pittsfield and North Adams. Could you explain a little bit about why it is that you felt there was a need there, and like what Adams was at that time before serving or beginning to serve as a link between Pittsfield and North Adams.
Sure. I'm just gonna change. Sorry, I have to change locations because my mother has a doctor's appointment, so I'm gonna move to another part of the house.
Why did you feel there was a need for there to be a link between Pittsfield and North Adams, and what would you describe Adams being before serving North Adams?
Well, Adams, it's an interesting town. It's actually the mother town. It was the first town in the Berkshires to be incorporated, and it's the third largest town in the Berkshires. Pittsfield, I think, is first, North Adams is second, and then Adams is third. So it makes sense to have, since it's such a community, about 7,000 or 8,000 people, it makes sense to have a venue for local people. But it also makes sense to have a venue for people who are passing through. And keep in mind that the more places you have to offer people, the longer they'll stay. So if there's only one thing to go to in North Adams, and that's Mass Mocha, and one thing to do in Williamstown, which is maybe the Clark or the 62 Center, then they'll stay for the weekend. But if you have another thing that they can do, they may stay for a longer weekend. So it's a way to keep the energy going in this part of the northern Berkshires. And the question is always put to us, well, why have another venue? But if you think about it, if you go to Broadway in New York, how many venues are within a half a mile? There's like hundreds. And so what does that mean? That means that people come from all over the world because they know that they can go to a lot of different venues. So that was the idea, is to make something for the local people, but also something for the Berkshires as a whole.
Thank you. Are you currently in Adams, or where are you located right now?
I'm actually in Athens, Greece. You want to take a look at the Acropolis?
Yes.
And I'll walk you outside so you can see my view. The sun is going down, so there's the Acropolis. And this is there's the Temple of Zeus behind me, the ancient ruins, and the Acropolis. So that's kind of where I am right now. It's 8 o'clock in the evening, or 8:30. But I'll be back in the States in September when my classes start.
How long is your residence in Adams? I don't know if it's
Hold on, I just lost the audio. Say that again?
How long was you a resident in Adams? I'm not sure if it's back to Adams.
Yeah. Adams is like a second home for me in New York, from New York. So my first home is New York, and Adams is number 2. So because I teach in New York City, I'm kind of on an academic schedule, mostly in New York during the week and during the school year. So let me just shut this because it's trafficy and loud. Adams, we have a bed and breakfast called Topia Inn. Now the bed and breakfast kind of came out of the fact that we needed a place for, if we wanted to have workshops, or if we wanted to have performers stay someplace, we needed some housing. And at the time when we got the theater, we realized that there was really no place there's no hotel in Adams. They would have to stay in North Adams or in Pittsfield. This was, of course, way before Airbnb took off. But we had purchased a building behind the theater as kind of a support space for the theater with 10 rooms. And so a lot of my time I spend there. Now, we do have some workshops there as well as having tourists come and stay with us. This September, we're going to have a workshop with Sheila Jordan and Jay Clayton, who are two iconic jazz vocalists. And if the theater, were ready by September, we would go in there probably and do a performance for the community. But hopefully down the road, that's something we can do. So there is a need for this theater for sure.
Yeah. So to go off of that, how would you describe the importance of community art spaces?
For some reason your words are garbled. Can you type that in, or somebody else repeat that? I don't know if anybody else is having the same problem, but I'm having a little trouble.
I just put it in the chat.
Oh, it's in the chat. Cool. Yeah, well, the community aspect of it is very important because I think it's mostly the young people and the older people. They really need a place to collect and share experiences. So parents need to have a place where they can take their kids. Teenagers need a place to go to after school so they don't get into trouble on the streets. And elderly people really need something so they're not sitting at home watching TV all day long. It's very important. And it's very important to the quality of our lives. That's how I would describe, the importance of a community space. It has to do with the quality of our life. Mm-hmm.
New question for you in the chat.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with Marianne McSweeney, who's on our board of directors. She's also a bass player, and I think you already spoke to her as well. But we both are seeing that kind of like an influx of artists that are coming to the area, and of course we need a venue. So these people they're coming to the area. They're leaving the cities. A lot of artists are leaving the cities in droves, partly because of the pandemic, but also because it's tough. There's a lot of competition, and there's very few outlets and such. So having places to be able to perform, to be able to get together, to rehearse, to work with each other, that's how I envision this going. This is kind of the direction that it's heading. More and more artists are coming to the area. So what do? Well, we want to get together. We want to meet with each other. We want to write music together. We want to play music together. We want to, look at each other's artwork. We want to, watch dance performances, and do choreography, and all of that good stuff. Yeah. So having a space is critical, to that, because how much can you do in your living room? Yeah, the word topia is a Greek word. It means landscapes. And so that's, for us, this was creating cultural landscapes. And we found, it's interesting how we found the space. A friend of mine who lives in Adams, his name is John Worth, he's also a bass player. Now he's 10 years younger than me, so a lot of the people, when we first came to Adams in the mid-2000, around 2004, 2005, a lot of the people who were maybe 40 or 50 years old and younger didn't know that there was a theater. There was just this space back there, and they didn't know what it was. So my friend John said, I think there's behind, the rail trail, I think there's an old theater there. So we contacted community development, and they said, yeah, there's a building here, there's a theater, and guess what? It's for sale. So we went in there, and it was a wreck. I mean, no one had been in there for over 20 years. So we just got the whole community involved. It was really exciting. We had about 30 people, and all of them volunteers. And then we raised some money, and we cleaned it up. We added electricity. We added all the elements that were for safety, like exit signs. We rebuilt the original vaudeville stage because it had holes in it. No one wanted to perform on it. And started having performances. So that's how the whole thing happened. But before that, we actually occupied the cafe space. Now, the original lobby had been taken over by Subway because the former owner of the theater had rented it out. And the space next to it, which was an empty office space, we figured out that, okay, it would be great if we could, with the money that we have, to make this a little venue, put a cafe in there, and then show people the theater. Again, because most of the people in town who were under 40 or 45 years old had no idea that there was a theater in there. So that's what we did. For 2 years, we ran the cafe. We had small performances like one-woman shows, and we even had a buto dancer dance up on the top of the bar. We had a lot of fun. Poetry readings, live music, people from New York. All of our friends were coming up and loving the idea that they could walk on grass and and play a gig. And at the same time, we would take people back and show them the theater, and that's how we reintroduced the whole community to the space. So basically we had the two venues. One was the cafe, which was all year round. And we had performances for about 2 years where people would come and perform, as I just mentioned, smaller, almost like vaudeville. And then we had the very first performance that we had in the theater was the Love Show. And that was former members of Cirque du Soleil from Brattleboro and Ringling Brothers. And they were friends of ours, so we basically invited them. They put on a show for the community, and about 350 people came. So that was the big event, and that was kind of, having that event helped us to get people excited in the community, get the money that we needed to renovate things and pay the performers. And that was like the big splash. After that, we had smaller, we had heavy metal groups coming in and bringing their bands, and we had, whatever we could imagine, we did. We had something called the Goddess Fair, which was for little kids dressed up as little goddesses. And we just opened it up to the community, whatever people wanted to see. We asked them, gave them pieces of paper and say, okay, write down what you want. And some people wanted to have some kind of a film thing because that's reminiscence of what it was. So we had the Berkshire Film Festival there, and we would have people come and talk about the movies that they made. So we had Doug Trumbull come and show 2001: Space Odyssey and talk about how he made that movie. So there was always an educational aspect to it as well. Actually, I do want to mention one thing. There's something that I did called the Symphony of 100 Carpenters. And what I did was I invited people from the community to come in, and we had about 40 people. And they all had, I told them to bring hammers, tape measure, bags of nails, and an apple. And what we did was we had everybody in kind of like, it's actually on YouTube, in a row where they would shake the bags and nails, and everything was timed. So it was like it was a composition. And instead of musical instruments, we had the nails, we had the hammers, we had people slapping the tape measures, and everything was orchestrated and timed. And at one point, everybody stopped, pulled out an apple from their crunchy paper bag, and at the same time, they did this crunch. So, like 40 people crunching this apple. And then we went back to hammering and nails and shaking bags. And at the very end, the concert ends with everybody opening up a can of soda. So like a sound at 40 times 40. So those are the types of things that we did. We just tried to make it fun and educational, and at the same time get as many people involved from the community as we could. For me, it's very important to have an educational aspect because I'm a teacher. I'm a performer, but I am a teacher. So I love teaching. And it's a great way to get people familiar with the arts, is through education. So yeah, so it's critical that if you have the experience of creating art yourself, then you're more likely to really want to absorb it and witness it. I teach at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. I'm in the film department, and I teach my students film scoring, music, songwriting, and I also teach them sound design, how to put sound effects and how to edit and do recordings and that kind of thing. So I'm sort of a sound designer and a musician, composer, and that's what I teach my students at school. The school, yeah. The biggest challenge was the financial aspect, because the theater really needed quite a bit of money. Not as much as the 62 Center, which was, in the, I don't know, maybe, did they call it 62 Center because it was 62 million? No, I think it was the class of 62. But anyway, it was something close to that. And what we found was that really we could make a space for maybe 1.5 million to 3 million. So for that little amount of money, if you compared it to the value it was going to bring back to the community, it was actually quite significant. But even so, we just didn't have, I'm an artist, all my friends are artists. We could go in there, we could clean up the theater, we could use the hammers and nails ourselves and do as much work as we possibly could. But I didn't have access to people with enough donation money to be able to get it going on that kind of level. Yeah, we'd actually thought that the town of Adams was going to help us. And at first they had promised that they would. But then they got involved in, I think they got involved in other things that they also felt were equally or even more important. And they kind of left this, they left it up to us. And it was too much for us. That's why it's really great to have a new energy coming in and new resources, because that's what we're keeping our fingers crossed that this can really happen. And however we can help with the boots on the ground and word of mouth and just good positive thoughts and energy, that's what we're able to do. Yeah. I envision the Adams Theater being something very modern, something that's not happening right now anywhere. Instead of a sit-down theater, I envision this as something to be very highly technological and creative and immersive, and I want to see something there that no one else has right now in the Berkshires. And I think it's a good time for that, because the technology is really evolving right now into something that's possible, and it's not that costly too. You can, with just a bunch of projectors and some computers, you can make some real magic happening if you have the right people on board.
I'm gonna go ahead But those are all the questions that we have currently for you. Sarah, Eugene, is there anything that you'd like to ask at the moment?
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your group and what it is that that your plan is for getting things happening in Adams.